Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going into how to create a map mod for the game DEFCON Everybody Dies by Introversion Software. It's a pretty old game, but I still think the modding scene has a lot of potential. But making mods is pretty annoying in this game because there's not a whole lot of documentation as to some of the errors you can run into and just some of the small things that'll trip you up. So I decided, after making a couple of mods and getting pretty good at it, that I would just show my workflow, show my process, and show some of the things that can trip up some newcomers. So I hope you find this really helpful, and I hope that this can help you bring your ideas to life. So let's just get into it. So before we get started here in making your own map, we're going to want to actually download a couple of things first. A couple of tools that are just going to make your life easier. Some of them are necessary, some of them are just optional, but really, really useful. First, you're going to want one of the modding tools for making your own maps. Right now, at this very moment, there's only one. There is the DEFCON mod suite made by Zanzer7 way back in the day. It's okay. It will get the job done. It's pretty buggy. There's a lot of post-processing that needs to be done with the data to get it to work nice with the game, but it will work for what we need to be doing. There is also another tool in development called DC Earth or DEFCON Earth, and it's not finished at the moment. I will redo this section once it is out and I get my hands on it and figure out how to use it. But at the moment, we're just going to be going with the DEFCON mod suite. You're also going to want a paint program that isn't just paint. It needs to be something that has the ability to work with layers and transparency. I use paint.net. It is probably what you are going to be using because it's just so ubiquitous and so easy to use. You're also going to want something that can change the bit depth of a bitmap image. GIMP can do this. I don't think paint.net can, so I'm just going to recommend you download GIMP as well. The reason for that is because all of the images that are used need to be either 8-bit or RGB. You're also going to want a Notepad program. Notepad++ is standard. You're going to want Microsoft Excel. It's not absolutely required, but it's going to make your life so much easier when you are placing cities and fixing city populations, because when you're working in the DEFCON mod suite, you really don't want to put in all your populations by hand. And I'll show you a neat little trick to populate the cities with the correct population data at the very end. Depending on what you're doing, you're also going to want a GIS program. It's optional, especially if you're not going to be doing a real-life map. If you're going to be doing a fantasy map, this really isn't a concern. But if you're going to be doing a real-life map, you're going to want something that just works instead of going onto Google Maps and, trying to manipulate the image the way you want. The nice thing about GIS programs is that you can actually change projection. So if you're trying to get the map to look a certain way, changing the projection can make the difference between it not working the way you want and it actually working the way you want. So these are the things you're going to want. You don't really need to know what you're doing with GIMP in order to change the bit depth. I can show you how to do that later on. But you're kind of gonna know how to use paint.net, Notepad++, Excel, and just if you're going to be messing with the GIS program, you might as well know how to use it, but it's going to be what it's going to be. If you don't know how to use it properly, then, you could probably make it work regardless. So now that you've kind of decided what you want to map, we kind of want to find the map that we're going to make because we're going to grab from it later. And before we even start anything, we want to kind of get an idea as to whether this is going to work properly. It's almost like a sanity check, right? So I'm going to show a couple of different areas in the world that would make sense to map and some places that wouldn't really make sense unless you made some major modifications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open ArcGIS and I'm going to show you some areas that are probably good maps and then areas that are probably not good maps. So let's get ArcGIS open real quick. I might skip ahead here. Okay, I need to remind myself to blank that out. Okay, so now that we have ArcGIS open, we're going to kind of go through a couple of different areas. When I made my North America mod, I was thinking, okay, well, we're going to have North America in the center, and we're going to get rid of Russia because we don't want to have this cut off land area, and then we're going to have some problems if we want to include the Northwest Passage, right? So when I said we want to consider projection, what we could have done, and this is what I ended up doing, is I changed the coordinate system to North America Lambert conformal conic, and now we have something that more resembles what we're looking for, although obviously you'd have to adjust the scale properly. We have the Northwest Passage, we have the Arctic Ocean, and you could actually have a little bit of this South America here if you'd want. But you can actually cut off Russia if you'd like to, which is what I ended up doing, because you don't want to have this pocket up here where you can't place a travel node. And I also ended up getting rid of Africa and Europe because they just weren't relevant for the mod. But that is how I ended up doing that. And the nice thing is we have all this ocean on the side, and although I said earlier that you want to have a good distribution of land, it's not always possible, and you're going to have that giant ocean on the side sometimes, and you can't really just avoid it depending on what you're making. Another thing I did was for Japan and Korea, I would go through and try to make it so that Korea ended up going off the top of the map into Manchuria, and Japan was just an island. And although China is directly to the west of Korea, because of the way that I had oriented the map, it actually made it so I could ignore it. So if I were to go to I might skip through this until I find it. Okay, here we go. If we were to go to Japan and create a projection based on Japan, because obviously this is centered over at the US, we want a Japan-centered map, so we're going to do a Japan-centered projection. We have something like this, but we kind of can't really use this, right? Because we have this area right here that will get cut off if we move to the side of the map. So what we can do is actually rotate the map depending on what program you're using. And this is a nice reason to use a GIS program instead of like Google Maps or something. And see, now I have essentially the extent that I used for the map. I can get rid of this extraneous land on the side, and now I have all of this to work with, and I won't have any land on the sides to cut off. And the only problem that I could see arise, and it kind of did arise, is that I couldn't get a node all the way up in here, in this little bay here, and it made it pretty difficult to traverse it, but I ended up getting it to work. So those are just some considerations. Something you also could do is you could keep your projection, normal if you'd like, and just do a landmass, but then just cut off certain areas. Like for a Europe mod that I saw somebody make, you could just have Europe, but then what would happen with Russia, right? Russia goes off the side of the map, and if we were to go around the wraparound, we would have this giant straight cut off where you could just roll your subs up and launch at Moscow. And that would be kind of dumb, right? Because there is no landmass on Earth that has that kind of cutoff. It's just super unnatural. So what I saw them do was actually cut Russia off of the map, and you would have just Europe. And that's actually what I'm going to do with this tutorial, just not for Europe. That is a way of doing it. And I actually saw a mod where they did it with Asia too. They had all the way to, they had Japan, they had South Asia, but they cut off Europe and they cut off everything past Istanbul. And they cut off Africa. And they just had Asia as its own landmass. So there's a couple of different ways you could go about it, but really the best ways to do it is consider what you're doing, change your projection if you think you can get away with it, and then if worst comes to worst, you can just erase extraneous land masses that make the map ugly. So now that you have decided what you want to map, we're going to actually set up the mod folder structure that is required when you're making mods. Now, the first things first, if you do not have a mods folder in the DEFCON folder, make one. What you want to do is just go into your DEFCON folder and make a folder called mods. You can see it right here. I literally have a mods folder, and it's just called mods with a lowercase m. And if it's not there, make it. And once you've made it, the game will be able to find it, and inside you will have all the mods that you have downloaded or have made or what have you. That is how you're going to set up your DEFCON mods folder. To set up the actual mod you're going to be making, which is just one of those many folders that you had installed in your mods folder, you are going to want to actually create it. And I find the best way to do that is to clear off the desktop and just make the folder structure. So I have a blank desktop right here. I'm just going to create a new folder, and we're going to make the name of our mod the actual mod folder name. I'm going to be mapping West Virginia just as a fun little example mod, so I'm just going to call it West Virginia. So inside that folder, we are going to have 3 files. We are going to have a folder labeled data. We are going to have a screenshot.bmp, which is basically going to be the preview image. You can literally just grab this from another mod for the time being. Actually, I'm going to go and grab both mod.txt and screenshot.bmp. You want to copy that and paste it into your data. And you might think, well, why would we do that? Why would we use a different mod? But that's just to get the BMP and the TXT file in there, because if you go into your mod.txt, you will literally see that it has a certain file structure that the game looks for, and it's easier to just rewrite these than actually make them from scratch. The same applies for screenshot.bmp. You don't want to create a .bmp file and then open up paint.net and then configure it yourself. It's just easier to use a base file. So now that we have our highest folder made, we want to actually go into our data folder, and we're going to want to create 2 different other folders, I guess, subfolders. You're going to want Earth, and you are going to want graphics. And inside Earth, you're going to have all of your territory data, you're going to have all of your coastline data, you're going to have all of your cities, you're going to have all of your international borders, and inside of graphics, you are going to have the literal files that the game uses to make the map that you're looking at. There's a kind of underlay to all of the game objects that shows up in the game. If you really zoom in, you can kind of see the blurred borders of water and land, and you will actually come to realize when you actually make the graphics yourself is that these are literally just images that the game is transplanting onto the map. So now that we've made our literal world files, or I'm sorry, not world files, we've actually set up our folder structure, we're going to look at the kinds of files we're going to actually have in them. So in that Earth folder, we're going to have AR markers, we're going to have travel nodes, we're going to have cities, coastlines, international, territories, and we're going to have a couple of graphics for like a blurred underlay, a map, a territory, a water BMP, a water shaded. These I'll all show you how to make. There's also, if you go back into data, you can make a game options.txt. I would recommend at first making one, or rather transplanting one from another mod, because the nice thing about it is you can actually increase the maximum number of cities, and that's going to seem really strange at first, but once you do that, you can actually make sure all of your cities are where you want them to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into this game options file and go to cities per territory. The max default is set to 50. Set that to like 500 and save it. And now all your cities are going to pop up. So now that we have our folder structure done, we're going to move on to actually showing you how to make these files. So now that we have our folder structure that we've created, we want to actually populate that folder structure with all of these files that tell the game how to generate our map and all of the territories. The game's not just going to do it for us because we put a folder called West Virginia in there. We need to literally tell the game what we want. And to do that, it will actually read image files and it will read .dat files with lists of XY coordinates. The XY coordinates we can generate later. We want to focus on the literal paint images now. The best way to do that is to get a screenshot of the map you want, and you want to have all of your international boundaries in it already. You want to have all your coastlines and stuff in it already, and then you want to convert that to 512 by 285. You want to resize that image. And then you want to take that image, take it into paint.net, and then make a layer above and trace everything. You want to have 3 different traces. You want to have a coastline plus state boundaries. You want to have coastlines only, and then you want to have territories, which is the literal territory divisions that we're going to have in DEFCON. And the reason we want all these different things is because it's going to make it a lot easier when we go to do different things. So you don't need GIS to do this. I'm just going to use GIS because I find it easy for me to use, but you can literally use anything that has a map. So here I have West Virginia, which is what I'm going to be mapping. So the first thing that I have is I have the extent that I want, but it's kind of hard to see the state boundaries. They're really, 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 really light in this particular overlay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into what's called the Living Atlas, because there is this thing built into ArcGIS called the Living Atlas, which is basically just a big database of really, really useful things. And some of these things are polygons, which could be states, they could be counties, which I'm actually going to use counties because I can use those to make territories. But there's just so much stuff in the Living Atlas. I can't go into it all right now. but it's just super useful for map making. So I'm going to go to, if you're at the start, it's going to be here, but you're going to want to go into View, Catalog Pane. You don't want to do state boundaries, or you could do state boundaries depending on what you're doing, but I'm actually going to do county boundaries because states are made up of counties. So if I'm going to take a state and divide it up, I'm going to be dividing it up into counties. So let's just put the counties there, put it on top of the hillshade. So we have our counties. It's kind of hard to see that, so we're going to want to select only the ones that are in West Virginia. So we can do state boundaries. So state generalized boundaries, and we can do a operation to literally cut out the well, actually, we don't need to do that because we actually have a lighter or a stronger color that we're actually seeing. So we actually don't need to do that. So we want to make this a little bit more visible, so we can actually right-click States, go to Symbology, click our symbol, and big black outline. Look at that. That makes things so much nicer. And I also think that we should go into USA counties and do something to that too, so we can actually see the counties when we resize the image, because as it is now, once we resize the image, all of this is going to go away. It's going to be really hard to see. So let's make it something that we can see. So black outline would be okay, but let's make something that's a little bit easier to see. You could go in here and change the transparency back to 0. And then we could go into properties. We can literally change the color. Let's change it to red. And then put states on top. And now we have state outlines in black and county outlines in red, and it looks a little ugly, but it's going to go away, I promise you. So now we can literally take a screenshot. I have light shot, so it's literally just print screen, but you want to kind of get a 2-to-1 ratio with your image, where you have about twice the distance long ways than tall ways. So I have this screenshot. I'm going to call it whatever. Literally whatever, because I think that's really funny. So now I have my screenshot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this in paint.net. And now that I have paint.net, I'm going to resize this image. I want to have it 512 by 285. So it made it a lot smaller, but you can still see all of these boundaries. So now what we're going to want to do, and this is probably the most tedious part, is we want to create a new layer. This is actually really, really important. You want to work on the layer that you want to work on the right layer, and we are going to trace these boundaries. It can take a steady hand, and it can take a couple of tries sometimes, but you only have to do it once. And the more detailed, the better. And you'll see that, like, with your resizing, you get lines that are a little bit thicker than your original, or than your pencil tool. You want to use the pencil tool to do this, by the way. You only want to do it 1 pixel. You only want to have it a width of 1 pixel. You don't want to go in and use the paintbrush tool to do this. The reason why you don't want to do this, it will become clear later, but the explanation I can give now is when you are setting up your territories, you want the boundary to be only 1 pixel thick. And you can kind of see your progress by making the layer below transparent. I might speed this part up because it's extremely tedious. This is probably one of the most tedious parts of the entire mod making process. Alright, so now that we've actually made our layer with just the coastline, we're going to be using the state border as the coastline. Everything else is going to be water. That's just a design choice. We're cutting away all the extraneous land, and we're going to let all these naval deployments work over here. It's obviously not reflective of real life. It's just for fun. So we have our layer done with just the state border, but now we're going to do the county borders as our international border base map. So we're literally going to want to create a new layer, and we are going to want to do the exact same thing, but with all of the county boundaries. And I'll probably speed this up too. Alright, so now that we have our traces of the coastlines and the international borders, first off, give yourself a pat on the back. This is by far the most tedious part of the entire modding process, in my opinion. So now what you want to do is we're going to want to create another layer, put it below these two layers that we've just made, and drop a white background. Then what we want to do is we want to just get rid of this background overlay of the screenshot. And now we're going to want to make a couple of saves. So first what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make a save of just the coastlines. So the way we do that is we uncheck the international borders, merge the layer down for the coastlines that we just made, select the image, copy it, file, new, it'll copy the aspect ratio, paste, and now we have just an image of our coastlines. So now we just file, save as, go into our game folder. We want to make a new folder where we're going to have all of our miscellaneous stuff. Go inside that and just save it as coastlines base map. First, yeah, about that. So before we even, all of these files are going to be saved as BMPs. So save. We're done with that one. So now we want to make the base map where we have also the international boundaries. So we want to merge down this boundaries layer onto this layer. So we literally just go merge layer down, layer 3 merges onto layer 4, and we have our international boundaries. So now we do the same process, Control A to select everything, Control C to copy, file, new, Control V to paste, and now we have our image. We're going to do the exact same thing, save as, coastlines plus borders base map, and it's going to be a .bmp. And now what we're going to do is we are going to figure out how we want to divide up our territory in game. So this is where you're going to want to consider some game balancing, and the way you want to do it is you want to have it so each territory will have a certain amount of land first. You don't want to just give a tiny bit of land to one territory, but you also want to give the territories cities that they can work with. So if I were to give all of northeastern West Virginia to one territory, I'd be giving them Wheeling, I'd be giving them Morgantown, I'd be giving them Martinsburg, I'd be giving them Fairmont, I'd be giving them basically every city besides Charleston and everything. So we're going to want to figure out a sensible division into 6 different territories, and it can kind of help to get a map of West Virginia and its counties as a reference. So here we have just West Virginia and its counties, and some of these also include cities, so we can kind of make decisions on how we're going to divide based on that. So I'm going to find a division that is happy with me, and I'm going to get back to you. So I've come up with a reference that I'm happy with for how I'm breaking down the territory. I'm giving the Pittsburgh area to 1, I'm giving the Panhandle to 1, and I'm giving the main area splitting between 4. This isn't perfect. Obviously, the eastern area here has a lot fewer cities than, say, this entire area with Morgantown and Wheeling and all that. But it's, it's not going to be perfect. Every territory is going to have their advantages and disadvantages. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into our coastlines and borders base map, and we're actually going to dissolve some of these borders that we don't want. So we want to look at our reference, figure out where we're going to merge, and just get rid of all these borders. So we have Mason and Putnam counties. We want to identify them on here, and it can get a little annoying, I will admit, but it's going to be what it's going to be. So this is Mason County, this is Putnam County. We're just going to take our tool and our pencil tool, and we're just going to go over it in white. And we're going to do that for all of the areas that we want to make into this green territory. So Putnam, Kanawha, and Clay counties, we will do the same for. So Mason, or Boone County and Kanawha County also is part of our green territory, so we're going to dissolve that border. And we're just going to keep doing this for every single county, or I guess depending on whether you're using county as your international.dat border, it's going to depend entirely on what you're going to decide, but I'm using county borders as international borders for DEFCON purposes. So now we go Logan County. I can tell it has this little foot area. And then Boone County. Can identify that there. And you kind of just want to use your reference to dissolve all of these borders. And you might think, well, why did we do this? Why did we draw all these if we're going to dissolve them? But we're going to be using the borders for a different purpose later on down the road. This is literally just to generate our territories. So I might speed this up a little bit. So now we have our first territory completely cleared out. And now we're going to do the same with the other territories, but we're going to leave the borders between the territories. And something you can also do, and you might have just seen me do it while it was sped up, is you can literally take out all the places where the border meets the edge of your territory, or it meets the edge of the water, and you can literally just get rid of the area it meets, but then pull out your paint tool and just fill in everything else with white. Alright, so now we have created our base map for the actual borders within DEFCON. So we want to make sure we actually don't overwrite the previous base map, because remember, we're working off of the file we saved as coastlines and borders. So we want to go into File, Save As, and just name it something like Territories Base Map. So now we have 3 files, and we can get rid of these now. We have 3 files. We have, in our miscellaneous folder, we have our coastlines, we have our coastlines and territory, or I'm sorry, we have our coastlines and we have our state boundaries, and we have our coastlines and our literal DEFCON territory boundaries. Wonderful. So we are going to use these to build our actual territories next. So now we've finally gotten to the fun part. We're going to actually make this base map into our territories files. So this is going to be step 4. So we're going to be making our territories now. So we are going to use that base map and just use the Save As tool to make all of these territories. And we're going to fill in all of the unwanted territory for each one with just black. And we're going to be using the paint bucket for most of this, but we can use other tools to just sharpen up areas that we want to sharpen up. So first things first, we're going to copy our base map, go into Data, Earth, and we're going to want to paste this like, we're going to want to basically make a bunch of copies of this. And we're going to want 6 of them. So now that we have these 6 of them, we're going to rename them. We're going to do North America. We're going to do South America, Europe, South Asia, Africa, and Russia. And they're all the same right now, but what these essentially do is if we go into a different mod folder, let's just use my North America mod for example, you'll see that all of these files, let's say we have Africa, this is the northeastern United States, these are literally what DEFCON reads from to figure out what territory to allocate to each nation. So we're going to go back into our West Virginia folder here, go into Data, Earth, and we're just going to start editing these. So we're going to go into paint.net again with all of these, and we're going to want to generate these territories. Now, in order to do that, we want to literally fill in the unwanted territory with black. So we have our first territory. It doesn't really matter exactly which one you're going to allocate to what. The only difference is North America, South America, and Europe, their silos will point one way, and Africa, Russia, South Asia, their silos will point the opposite direction. Those are literally the only differences, and you can, if you're really that pedantic about it, you can figure it out later. But you want to make all of the water black. You want to make the area that you don't want black. And you can see that there are kind of speckles where it kind of missed. We can fix these with the paint tool. And now, something that I feel like people miss a lot of the times when they're making map mods is they want to take the paint bucket tool, select white, and actually increase the tolerance a little bit, and we want to buff it out just a little bit. And the reason for that is because if we have it so that there's no buff out, it's really sharp and it doesn't look all that good. So you can experiment with the amount of buffing out. I find that like one paint bucket fill is good enough. So now we have Africa, or what is going to be referred to in the game as Africa, but really it's southwestern West Virginia. Now, what we also want to do is we want to give this some naval deployment zone. So what we want to do is we want to actually figure out where the water is, and to do that, we're just gonna go into here, paste our base map on a different layer, make it less opaque. So now we can see, oh, this area is where there's water. So we're going to go into that area. We want to select a gray. We want to use the brush tool, and we want to make it gray, and we want to brush out the area in gray where there's going to be naval deployment. So, and you don't want to get too close to the coastline, but you also don't want to be too far. It doesn't need to be too accurate. It's literally just a blob that you're going to be making to show where all of these territories can deploy. And you can balance these based on what you think is fair. Like, say, if a territory has a disadvantage to another, it may be a good idea to expand or perhaps maybe even take away some of their naval deployment area just to make the game a little bit more balanced. It's just something that you can think about while balancing your game, but it's ultimately up to you once you decide. So I think that looks okay for this particular section's naval deployment zone. So I can get rid of this top layer. Oh, look at that. I screwed up. I made it on the actual upper layer itself. So we're going to actually undo all of that and redo it on this lower layer. And this is nice. This is why paint.net is nice. It has this hardness value that you can actually use to kind of make it a little bit less sharp than the land deployment areas. So now we actually have our land and we have our naval deployment area. So this is our Africa file. And this is perfectly fine. So now we just want to go and do the exact same thing for every other territory. I did find out earlier that there is a hole here, so we just have to keep in mind that with our other files, we also have to make sure we fill that in, so we're not completely getting this entire area cut off when we're working on this area. Alright, so now that you have your territories, we can actually move on to the next step. So next we're going to actually create the graphics for our map. And these graphics are what DEFCON will use to actually make the map look visually appealing and also just show where the land and water is. So first we want to make water.bmp and watershaded.bmp. And the way we're going to do that is we're literally going to go and grab our base map, the one with just the coastlines, copy that, data, go into graphics this time, paste it, rename it to water.bmp, and we're going to right click it, open with paint.net yet again, and we want the water to be where the white is, so we're going to fill in the, well first we want to actually, there we go, okay, so we want to just fill in the land with black. And the white is where the water is. Save that. Okay, great. So now we make water shaded. So water shaded is literally this, but we want to make the bottom gray, as in the background, the white background. We want to turn that gray. So just do it, your paint bucket, file, save as, water underscore shaded.bmp. Wonderful. Okay. So we have that. So now we want to create territory.bmp. And to do that, we just literally invert the colors for water.bmp. So let's open up water.bmp, go to adjustments, invert colors, save as, territory.bmp. Wonderful. So now we want to make map.pmp. So this is going to be a little bit more involved, but it's really not that hard. We're going to go back to our base maps, grab the one with the coastlines and borders, go into data, graphics again, paste that, and we're going to rename it to map.bmp. And the way we want to set this up is we want to make the water blue, the borders white, and the land black. So the way I would do this is I would first take the magic wand tool and using flood mode, select everywhere that's white and hit Control X to get rid of it. And we are going to now take the magic wand tool again and select the borders. And since the flood tool is already selected, it'll just select all the black area. Take the paint bucket and paint the selected area. And the reason you don't want to just paint it outright is because you'll get this like overflow that you don't want. We just want white borders here. So now what we can do is go to our lower layer, and we can now right, okay, yeah, we want to put black on the lower layer and then merge this down. And now that we have black borders, or I'm sorry, black water, we have black land, and we have white borders. Now we just need to get the blue water. Now, how do we do that? Well, it's simple. Take the magic wand tool, select your water. You want to select the water. You don't want to have flood mode selected. You want to select everywhere there's water. And if you have multiple bodies of water, you can hold control and just select different ones. But here, we're just going to select this one giant ocean that we have. Control X to cut it. Create a new layer below. Grab the paint bucket. Blue water. And I really like this shade of water. I think it looks really good for DEFCON maps because it's really similar to what the vanilla uses. But this is now our map.bmp. So just merge this top layer down, and now we have our map file. Wonderful. Okay. So now we want to create a file called blur.bmp, and this is going to be used as a overlay for the original map. So we want to take our map.bmp and just replace the water with black again. So we can literally undo everything we did. And we also want to make the land gray. So what we can do is, again, just go back into our Magic Wand tool and select all the counties. Or actually what we can do is just select everything with flood mode, select subtract, whoops, okay, I clearly don't know what I'm doing, so let's just select all of the areas individually. It doesn't take that long anyways, it's just a workflow thing. If you're better with paint.net than I am, go ham. If not, you can do what you know how. I'm just showing you how I know how. So now that we have all these selected, and you hold control to select multiple times, you can't just click and click and click and click. You have to hold control and click. So we have all of the interior. Remember, we can't have the border selected. We have to have the interiors of each of the states selected. We hit Control X, and it gets rid of everything except the boundaries, the water, and the coastlines. So now we want to create another layer below that, get our paint bucket, and we want to paint this gray. And I believe it's a dark gray that we want it painted. And now that we have that, merge down, go to adjustments, and we want to blur it because it's blur.bmp. Actually, it's under effects. Under effects. It's blur, under effects, blur, Gaussian blur. And I think that the radius being 3 is about perfect. So now we have our blurred map, so file, save as, because remember, we're still working in map.bmp. We want to save it as a different file. So blur.bmp. And we have all of our graphics. That is done. So now that we have our territories and we have our graphics, I think it is about time we go and test our mod. So let's just rename the mod. In terms of the screenshot, I actually like to, and this is absolutely your decision, I like to make my screenshot just a screenshot of the map. So I'll just literally take map.bmp and replace it with screenshot.bmp, or rename it to screenshot.bmp. And your screenshot.bmp and your mod.txt are all on the top level. So now that that is done, we have our graphics, we have our territories. We want to just make sure everything works. So we have our mod folder, and I've been working on my desktop the whole time. We want to go into our DEFCON folder, and go into mods, and take our mod folder that we've been working in and just drag it into the mods folder. Now we just go and boot up DEFCON. Scroll down. I have a lot of mods installed, so I'm going to select our West Virginia mod, apply it, and obviously this background didn't change. It's because we haven't changed our coastlines or international.dat. We've literally just changed our map elements. So We can select our territories just fine. They actually come out the way that we've set them up in game. Let's just add all of the AI players. So this looks a little strange. You might be like, oh my god, what happened to my map? But actually, this is kind of what you want, because we've actually been working entirely on all of this. The only reason it looks as weird as it does is because we haven't messed with the cities. The cities are in their default places, and so are the coastlines, and so are the international borders. We will get to that in a little bit, but this is kind of what you're looking for once you've worked on all of your graphics and all of your territories. And if you scroll over territory right here, you can see they've placed in the right places. They're moving through land. We'll work on that later. They're literally just working in the default Sailable because we haven't overwritten that. But in terms of placements, everything is as it should be, as we've created it. So at this point, you can just exit DEFCON because we know everything's right. And I'm going to get rid of the one we have on the desktop because we've already put the file into our mods folder. So we're going to be working in this from now on. So now that we have that done, I think it's a very good time to take a break because there is a lot more that we have to do, and we've already gone through a lot. So I think I'm going to take a break and pick this up tomorrow. So time skip here. So before we move on to actually laying down cities and coastlines and borders, I want to go over something that might actually happen to you while you are in the process of testing your mod. So if you open up your game and try to activate the mod, there may be an error that you get as soon as you activate it. So I'm going to activate it here, and I have a error. It says fatal error, error reading bitmap, line number 216. This error means that your bit depth of one of your images, one or more of your images, is incorrect. Oh, there's a game alert. So the way you want to solve this is you want to go into the files that you've made, and you want to search for which ones might be the offending file. And to do that, you want to open them with GIMP. So this is the file that I've manually set it to be incorrect. So if you go to Image and Mode, you are going to want to select something other than indexed. You don't want indexed. You want either grayscale or RGB, depending on whether you have colors in your image. So I'm going to click grayscale. And you also want to make sure that your precision is 8-bit integer. You don't want 16 to 32-bit. You want 8-bit. So now that I've selected that, I go to File, Export As, click my Africa to overwrite it. And this is also important. You want to go into compatibility options and do not write color space information, and then export it. And depending on your settings, you might have to do that for every single file just to get it working again. But that's the only one I've modified. So now I should be able to load it up just fine. And it did not crash this time, and it's loaded. So I just wanted to go over that. That's a possible crash that you might have while you're working on your files. So next up, we are going to want to change the Sailable file. What this file does is just shows where ships can move to. And this is going to be related to your AI nodes. So if you have your Sailable file and you have your AI nodes on top of it, and you have your AI nodes on top of land, you're going to get a crash. So you want to do your Sailable first, and then you want to do your AI nodes. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into graphics, and I am going to go into water, and I'm going to copy water and paste it into earth and rename it to sailable.bmp. Then I'm going to go in, open it with paint.net, and I am going to take my paint bucket and buff out the sides a little bit, because you don't want to have it so your fleets can just roll up right onto the coast. You want to have it so that there's a little bit of space, kind of on the continental shelf, if you will, that things just can't move onto. Because if ships can move directly next to the land, it'll almost look like they're on top of it, and it'll just get really ugly. So you might want to just expand it out a little bit using the paint bucket. So that's done, and we can just save that, and we are done with Sailable. So now we're going to want to make a file called AI markers. So to do that, we're going to open Sailable in paint.net, and we're going to want to make a new layer on top of this one. And we are going to want to paint it all black. Then what we want to do is take this top layer and turn down the opacity so that we can actually see the unsailable land underneath. Then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take our pencil tool and get green, and we want to start painting dots around, or placing dots with our pencil around the land. And the reason why we want to do this is because these AI markers tell ships where to place and where to launch subs from. So the green ones are able to tell ships where to place. They essentially place them in a neighborhood region around the AI markers. And we're going to also place red ones, and those are going to be where the AI decides to launch from, in a neighborhood around it, of course. It doesn't actually just use the exact location of the AI marker. It will do it in an area around it. So I might speed this up. You're going to want to have 2 or 3 layers of this, and you want it to just surround all of your land masses. So now that we've placed the green ones, we want to place the red ones. The red ones you want to place a little bit more sparsely, and kind of try to place them in with the green ones, since you're placing them on the coastline where subs are going to surface and launch from. And there can be a little bit of leeway with this. It doesn't need to be exact, because it's going to use neighborhoods around these points anyways. So now that we've actually finished this layer, we're done. We just want to delete the background layer, turn up the opacity on the AI markers layer, and since we're working in the Sailable BMP, we still want to save as a different file, so we're not overwriting our Sailable. So just AI_nodes.bmp, and we're done with the AI nodes. Real quick before we start the next step, I accidentally misnamed the AI markers as AI nodes. Just name them AI markers instead. So we're going to start on travel nodes now. Now travel nodes basically tell ships where they can and cannot move. They are essentially waypoints for ships to be able to figure out exactly what their movement options are. If you've played first-person shooters before, you've probably seen areas of the map with nodes turned on, and you see this giant grid on the ground. That basically is pathfinding for enemies. It is the same for this, except since ships essentially move on their own, there needs to be a grid of nodes to show them where they can and can't go. So we're going to make this file, and this is going to be a little bit different because it's going to be a different resolution. We're going to want to open just any file. I'm going to open the AI markers file just because I don't mind losing it if I mess it up. But what we're going to do is we're going to click File, New, and we want to create a new file. So we want the resolution to be 800 by 400 pixels. And you might think, well, that's strange. Why? And I don't know. I don't know why they program it like that, but that's just how it is. So we are going to first color the entire thing black and save it as travel, that I can't type, travel nodes.bmp. It's going to be a .bmp file, of course, like everything else. And then what we're going to do is we are going to start from the very edge, almost like here, and we are going to place white dots in these corners. And we're going to save it. And then we're going to go into our DEFCON folder, like our main DEFCON folder, not the mods folder. And we want to go into Preferences, scroll until we find this second to last cluster, and we want to get this line that says render nodes. We want to change that to 1. Basically, a 1 is true, a 0 is false. So if we set this to 1, we can make it so that the game tells it to render the nodes. We might also have to protect this file to make sure it's read-only so that Steam doesn't try to overwrite it. So you can do that by right-clicking it, going to Properties, clicking Read-Only, and Apply. So now when we open DEFCON, so that also happens. This file is extremely finicky, and it's to the point where you might want to just place your nodes one at a time. Okay, so it's not the nodes, it is the bitmap. So we're going to go into, give me a minute. We're going to go into travel nodes, open it with GIMP, going to go into precision mode. Aha! There's the culprit. It's indexed. Set it to grayscale. Export as, travel nodes, export, replace, compatibility options, do not write color space information, and export. And now we can take our pencil tool. I don't know how to use GIMP. So we can close that and go into DEFCON. Game loads fine. Node route size mismatch. Okay, so the reason why that is a problem is probably because the I may have made the landmass too big. That would be a bit of a problem, but it might not be bad. What we're going to want to do to hopefully salvage this is go into paint.net, and instead of having this node here, we're going to want to put it all the way in the corner, because nodes connect, and if they try to connect across land, they will refuse to. They will not connect across land if there's no straight line connecting them. So if there's a node over here and there's a node over here, if there's two nodes across the map from each other, they won't connect to each other properly, and it'll throw a node route size mismatch. And that tip of West Virginia where Wheeling is might interfere with that. So I'm going to place them directly in the corners. Save that. I don't know why it changed that to indexed. Let's try this again in GIMP. This is a really tedious process. There's not much you can really do about it until DC Earth comes out. Change that to grayscale again. Travel nodes, export. Do not write color space information. Discard changes. Okay. Now we just pray. Oh, what's a problem? That's a problem. All right. Let's figure out why this is happening. So let's get rid of these in this corner. And we might as well just go into GIMP and preemptively change this, because I'm sure it's going to save it as an indexed color. Yep. This process is always the most finicky because the nodes will actually not go all the way to the top of the map. Like I mentioned earlier, they will actually cut off at some point. Okay, so looks like I was right about that. So I can go to my whiteboard, go to draw erase, go to the center of the node, and draw a line and see where it touches, and see if I can get away with shaving off a little bit in Sailable. Okay. I might be able to do that. It's going to be a little tad ugly, but it's going to be fine. I think it'll be okay. Plus, it's looking like there's going to be space down here. I don't know why the node's not showing up. I'm going to go in and fix that real quick. So let's just get out of here. Let's go back into travel nodes. I'm just going to work in GIMP from now on this particular file, because it keeps being saved as an indexed color. So let's just put some of these nodes up there. Put a node down there. Export it. And now we're going to go into our Sailable, and we're just going to want to shave off the top few pixels of this kind of panhandle thing because it's getting in the way of our travel nodes. And so hopefully that should be fine. Let's give it another shot. All right. So we do know that they will connect over the bottom. So that should not be much of a problem. There is going to be a bit of a hang up when it comes to this north area, just because of the way the game is going to try to give orders. We can try shaving off a little bit more until it connects. So let's go ahead and try that. Okay, it will not connect at all for whatever reason, no matter what I do. So I'm just going to undo all that damage that we did to that file, and we're just going to live with the fact that you're going to have to manually move your units over the top. That's okay. I can live with that. So now what we're going to do is we are going to go back into our travel nodes, and we are going to add some more. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to slowly get closer to the landmass until we get thrown a node route size mismatch error. So I'm going to stick some stuff around here. Stick some stuff down here, maybe up in here. And I'm going to get rid of these. You want to get rid of extraneous ones that you know you're not going to need. Put a couple down here just so we know that ships can move around down there. Export. Go ahead and reload this. Okay. So I think that looks pretty good on the southern area. Maybe we can have one up in this little pocket here. So let's go a little bit closer here. Maybe have one up here, Get one up here. Over here. And as you learn, you kind of figure out like where you're gonna get a mismatch error. there's a certain amount of stretching that is done to the file, but it also doesn't include the entirety of the longitudes. It cuts off at a certain longitude also, so it's really hard to get it to stretch properly. So you may want to just do it with trial and error until DC Earth comes out. Okay, so for whatever reason, that didn't update my nodes. I overwrote my AI markers. Yeah, this is just one of the things that you can run into if you're not careful, like I'm not. Okay. So you can, essentially what these will do is they will, if a straight line can connect this node and a area where an order is given, the ship will be able to navigate to it. If not, it will not be able to. So let's say I place some ships into here. I can get into here because node 16 and node 15 and node 14 can all reach that. But let's say I decide I want to get into this area. It's going to go through these nodes, cross the seam, go up to node 6 and 7, and then move into that. Now, if I want to go around the tip, it's going to travel. It's going to go all the way up. So we could probably stand to put a couple more down, maybe one right at the top here, if possible, maybe one more in here, a couple over here, and maybe one more in this pocket, maybe one up here, just so you're not, just so the ships aren't like taking extremely unnecessary routes, essentially. Okay. I think I'm going to place a couple around here, around this little panhandle area. I might place one right here, and I'm going to place one or two in here, and then maybe one here, because you really don't want your ships taking like really unnecessary routes that will just waste time. It's going to be annoying for players if that's what happens. And you can have like upwards of like 60 nodes depending on how your, how much, how beefy your computer is. It's the more nodes you have, the longer it's going to take to actually load the game. But if you're really trying to get something really precise, then you might want to add some more nodes. Like for my North America map, I was doing the Northwest Passage, and my travel nodes looked crazy, and they take like, it takes the game like at least 5 seconds to load. So I'm happy with this. I think this is good enough because this node 22 is dealing a lot of work in this area where Pittsburgh is, and I think it's going to be enough to just be okay. It's not perfect, but I think it will work fine. So I'm going to go and get my AI markers back, and I will meet you on the next step in just a second. Now that we're done placing AI markers in travel nodes, we are going to want to place our coastlines and our international borders. And the way we're going to do this in this tutorial is going to be through the DEFCON mod suite that was made by Xanter7 several years ago. When DC Earth comes out, I'm going to redo this tutorial, but for now, we might as well just make do with what we got. So you can download the DEFCON mod suite from the mod list. I will link the mod list in the description. And once you've downloaded it, it's going to be a folder. Well, it's going to come in a zip folder. And I will get that open right now. So this is what's going to be in this when you unzip the folder. You're going to have data, an executable, a readme, and a source. And we're not going to worry about the source. We're only going to worry about the data and the exe. So inside data, there's going to be Earth, and usually there'd be a blur.bmp and cities default file here. I already got rid of them because I'm doing another take, but we're going to replace them anyways. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our blur.bmp from our mods folder, copy it, and paste it in the DEFCON mod suite Earth folder. Then we're going to go into paint.net, image, resize, 512 by 512. It's going to be a square image because the mod suite will automatically squish it. So then what we want to do is we want to go back to it, and we want to make sure it is in RGB, because for whatever reason the DEFCON mod suite can only read RGB files. So we're going to go into mode, RGB, export as, blur.bmp. This is why I had to do another take, because I couldn't figure out why the thing wouldn't open. So that's done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the mod suite. We're not going to run in full screen mode because it's annoying. And now we have our mod suite. So it has 3 modes. It has coastline mode, border mode, and city placing mode. We're going to start with our coastlines. So to zoom in, we use Q. To zoom out, we use E. And to place, we use left click. So we want to zoom in real far, and we want to get we want to stay basically near the center of the line, and we just want to start placing. You click to start, you left click to start, and you left click to continue placing. And we just want to get as precise as possible, but you know, a little bit of deviation isn't too important, because DEFCON is, you know, like, see how it's getting all jagged in this area? That's fine. I mean, DEFCON is, if you go into the original DEFCON map file and look at the coastlines, they're pretty janky to begin with, so it doesn't need to be absolutely exact. Having it look close is nice, but exact is not important. So I'm probably going to speed through this. So now that that is done, we click V to save it. And if we come over into our data folder, we have a coastlines.dat. And that is going to save all of the XY values of this file. It'll start with a B. That is just where if you're going to do multiple islands, you have a line break. Since this is only one island, there is no B. You would right-click to break the line in that case. And something I forgot to mention, in order to like pan the camera, it's WASD, just like normal. And again, Q and E to zoom in and out. So now that that's done, we're going to go and select borders. Well, actually first, we're going to copy this coastlines file into our data folder, into our earth folder rather, because we don't want to lose it in case we mess something up. So now that that's done, we're going to go into borders by tabbing. Now you see borders is lit up. And we are going to do the same thing with all of these county borders. And if there is a problem, you can hit U to undo a vertex placement. Alright, so now that we're done with all of our international border placement, or I guess in this case it's just counties, hit V to save. Sometimes it takes a couple of tries to save, but this time it did it first time. Now you have your international.dat. Copy that, paste that into your Earth folder, and now we are going to load up DEFCON to make sure this works. And you can see that the coastlines file did not copy over, so let's see. I believe the problem there needs to be a B at the bottom. So if you open that, if you open the file, scroll down and add a B on the bottom, I believe that will add that, and then scroll down on the international one, add the B at the bottom, save it. So that should be fixed. Let's reopen it. Oh, I must have accidentally edited the wrong file. I must have edited the one in the mod suite. What? Alright, give me a moment. Okay, I found the issue. You need to have a blank space below everything else. You can't have... The file should not just cut off at that. So let's reload the game. You still need the B, apparently. So B, and then a blank line below that. And it needs to be for both coastlines and international. So let's deactivate, activate, and you see the background of the game changes in the main menu. So now, when we load into the game, we have our coastlines and we have our international borders. Now you might see on the edges, oh well, they look a little weird, and the reason for that is because there is an off by 1 error in the arithmetic that the mod suite does, and this is really annoying because it actually misplaces the file, the XY values in the game. So we need to multiply them by a factor. And the way we do that is we're going to go into Excel. So we're going to just go into a blank workbook, and we are going to copy everything. We're going to do international first. We're going to Control A to copy, Control C. We're going to come into our just A1, and we're going to go into Paste, Import Text Wizard, Fixed Width, Next, and we're going to have a line break here. Finish. And that imports all of our XY values here. So now what we want to do is we want to go in and basically we want to create this formula here. So we're going to have equals if, and we want to check if this is a B, we want the value if true to be B, the value if false to be the actual we want the value if false to be the actual cell value times 1.0035. I believe that's correct. And the reason they do that is because yep, you have to put the B in quotes. So now if we take this and use the drag tool to drag it all the way down, we get different values for all of these XY values, but we keep the B when where they're needed. Now this one's a little strange. Why is this giving me a error in value? That is really weird. There's something wrong with the cells that I'm referencing. Why is that? Give me a moment. I have figured it out. It was the way I imported the text. So what we want to do is copy the text again and just first we want to clear what we had before. Copy, paste, import text wizard, delimited. Let's do space delimited and finish. And now we have that formula back there, but we've actually used it to grab our data properly. So yeah, we're going to continue pulling this down. And we are going to do the same thing. Okay, hold on. I pasted it into the wrong place. So yeah, go all the way back up to A1 first, unlike me. And there we go. Okay, yeah. So now what we want to do is do the exact same thing if in this value. So if this is equal to space, in quotes, value of true, space, in quotes, value of false, the actual cell times 1.0035. Oh, not space, if it's empty. I love Excel. There we go. Okay, so yeah, if B1 is equal to nothing, then make it nothing. If not, it's B1 times 1.0035. And we just drag this down all the way to the end. And we've multiplied all these values. So now what we want to finally do is we want to concatenate D and columns D and E so we can paste it back into the file. So we want to go into another column, do concat, open bracket, oops, concat, grab column D, grab D1, then we want to do a quote, space, quote, so that we have the space between the numbers, and then E1, close. And now when we go all the way down, we get all of the XY values we need. Then we just copy to select all of it at once, get rid of the previous one, the previous set of coordinates, and paste it in, and save. That's that. So now we're going to do the same thing with our coastlines. I believe we actually have fewer, so that makes it easier. So grab it, copy it. Control A is to select everything, by the way. So we're going to paste, import text wizard. Actually, let's just clear the entire workbook. We're going to do this from scratch again, because if we try to work with our previous work, we're going to get confused. So back to A1, import text, delimited, space delimited, finish. So if A1 is equal to B, just make it B. If false, it's going to be A1 times 1.0035. And for the second column, we are just going to make it empty instead of B that we check for. Take it all down. Do the same thing for column E here. So we've multiplied all of our coordinates by 1.0035. So now we just concat D1, do the space to make sure you get the space in there, E1, drag it down, select column G, copy, and paste it in, and those are your coastlines. Save that, and now we open DEFCON. And finally, we should have nice looking borders and nice looking coastlines. I would say that looks pretty damn good. So I'm going to take a break now, because after this we're going to get into city placement, and that is going to be rather annoying. So at this point it's good to just take a break and come back to it later. So I'm going to have a time skip here. So now that we're done placing international borders and coastlines, we're going to go and move on to the final step, which is placing cities. And this is also really tedious, but I have some tricks to make the process a bit easier. So they are essentially stored as tables in a .dat file, but they are just plain text, very similar to the international borders and the coastlines. It's easiest to work with them in Excel, but first we have to harvest them from the DAT file that's generated by the mod suite when we place the cities. So we want to get about 50 cities per territory, because in totally random games, if you have, more than 50 cities, you're going to get some variety in what your games look like. And, even if you don't have huge cities, like West Virginia only has a couple of cities that have more than 10,000 people. I could go down to like Milton, wherever that is. It's over near, Charleston, and it only has a population of about 2,000, but for the sake of actually having cities in the game, we need to inflate the populations, because all of them are going to have, 100. Each territory is going to have 100 million people. We're not going for realism here. So what I would do is, whatever thing you're mapping, get it up on Google Maps. I wouldn't use a GIS program for this, just because it's easier to search for cities. And open up population data for your map here. So we have all these municipalities in West Virginia, and we are essentially going to go down this, we're probably going to go through this entire list, because if we want to get 50 cities per territory, and we have 6 territories, that gives us 300 cities that we have to place if we want to get the ideal. Now, because West Virginia is such a sparsely populated area, we're probably not going to get that 50. So what I'm going to do is, in our preferences later on for the game settings, I'm going to probably cap the number of cities at 30. But until I figure that out, we're just going to get placing. So get your map up and open up your modding tools. Go into your mod suite and open the mod suite. So go to your city placer, and we want to start at the top and move our way down. So Charleston is the first city, so we want to find where Charleston is. Charleston is down here. Now this doesn't have this doesn't actually have county borders, so look up a West Virginia county map, hopefully one with cities. This is probably something that, okay, yeah, wonderful. So we have Charleston here in Kanawha County. That would be this one. So we zoom in, and once we find the place where you want to stick it, which is going to be about right here, we click and place. Name Charleston. Tab. No, it's actually enter to move down. Country, Kanawha. But see, we've screwed this up, and one of the things which DEFCON mod suite is really bad at is backspaces. So If you mess up, just right-click to get rid of it. Click again. Now, when you get to population, just do 1 and capital, yes. And the reason we want to make everything capitals is because if we have a city that's too close to something else, unless they're both capitals, they'll overwrite each other. So, or one of them just won't be placed, and it's really annoying to work with. So just make everything capitals. So now we want to go to Huntington. Where is Huntington? We can actually, and this is where Google Maps comes in, right? Search up Huntington, West Virginia. It's just west of Charleston. It's actually right on the border, right? Yes. So it's going to be right here. And if something's like right on the coast, you may want to place it slightly inland. It's Cabell County. 1 population, yes to capital. And we're just going to go down this list. It's going to take a while, but that's just city placement for you. So next is Morgantown. Morgantown is right here over by Cheat Lake. It's in Mon County. Now we go on to Parkersburg. Where is Parkersburg? It's in Wood County, which is over here. Wheeling, that's all the way up here in Ohio County. Martinsburg is over in Berkeley County. And we're just gonna keep going. And I will probably speed through a lot of this. So I've gone through and I've done the top 30 most populous. It's just for the sake of this video. I don't want to go through and do all of them on speed up. I feel like that would be pretty unnecessary. So I've just done the top 30, but later on I'm going to go and actually go through all of them and clean it up before I actually release the mod. So I'm just going to click V to save the cities file, and I am going to go and grab it out of the mod tools, mod suite rather. So now we have that cities.dat generated. We want to copy that, go into our DEFCON mods, into our Earth folder, and we want to paste the cities in there. Now if we open this in Notepad++, we actually see this table that I was talking about. So we have the top, I guess I did 31. We have the top 31 cities, I guess. And so now what we want to do is we want to clean up the data a little bit because the DEFCON mod suite doesn't allow spaces. So we just want to clean it up just a little bit. Make sure everything looks the way it's supposed to. Okay, I think that looks good for now. So before we mess with population data, I just want to run DEFCON real quick and see what it looks like, just to make sure that every territory has at least one city. And since we've actually put in our own cities file, it's going to overwrite the old one. So yeah, it looks like everybody's got a couple of cities at the very least. So you can see that the populations are gigantic because they're not actually divided up between very many cities. The best we have right now is the Pittsburgh area because we have a lot of cities up there. But see, something like, oh, this northeastern or northwestern segment only has 2 cities right now, so it has to divide 100 million over 2 cities, and that will take about 5 or 6 nukes to basically clean out the entire population. So that's kind of the point of adding a bunch of cities. There are a lot of mods that just don't have any cities whatsoever besides like the biggest ones, and that's quite a bit of a problem, and I will show you how to mitigate that problem later once I get more cities in. But this is why you want to have the whole every city as a capital, because these cities would not generate if the capital was not, if they were not like listed as capital. The one with the largest population would be prioritized. And you might think, well, I don't want all these satellite cities because we have splash damage. And I'll show you how to deal with satellite cities later. You can reduce their populations to 1 after we've actually dealt with populations, so we can get rid of a couple of satellite cities. But that will be taken care of later. We just want to make sure they all generate properly. So I'm going to go through and add a bunch more cities, and after that I will show you how to manipulate the populations to get it into a more playable state. So I have gone down this entire Wikipedia article, and I have added every single one of these cities and towns to the map. This is about what it looks like. Some people might consider it excessive, but I like doing it because it makes totally random games more interesting. So that's what that all looks like. However, I still don't think there's enough in this eastern area and this eastern area. I think everything else has enough, but I really want to get more cities in this area. So what I'm going to do is there's also an article for, instead of cities and towns, there's also census designated places that have plenty more, and I'm going to go ahead and add these too because I'm just scraping the barrel for cities. So I'm going to add those, and I will show you what everything looks like in the end. So if you're working on implementing cities and you have a problem like this, where one territory has 100 million people in one city and you have this nonsense country name, it's because if you go into your cities.dat file, you might have a space up here that is just a blank line. You want to get rid of that if that comes up. Something also to mention is that if you scroll all the way down, your bottom city will never appear. So once you're finished placing cities, there's a good chance that you're going to want to put a placeholder. So since I've deleted that top blank line, I'm going to go ahead and leave the game, reload the mod, set the cities to 500 so all of them appear, and your problem is gone. All the cities will place as they are supposed to. Something also to keep in mind if you are trying to reach a target number of cities when you're working is you can go into the debug.txt that is just in the DEFCON folder, and it will actually show reports of your game history. And I just loaded one up. It was a totally random game, so it actually, like, if cities are too close together, it won't spawn them anyways, even if they're marked as capitals. So that's probably the best way to do it, is just get a totally random game going and then look at the debug.txt once you leave the game, and you can see that Team 0 has 26 cities, Team 2 has 29 cities, Team 3 has 28 cities. So there are a couple of territories that if you run a totally random game, you will not get all the cities that you want. So you may need to actually continue adding cities until all of them have your target number. I'm going to stop at 30 for this particular mod because it's going to be really hard to get 50 cities from each area in West Virginia. But if you have a more populous area such as like Japan or some areas of the United States, you're going to probably want to get upwards of 40 or 50 per territory. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've added a couple more cities to the areas that were a bit sparse, and this is about what it looks like right now when I'm playing totally random. You can see that it actually will ignore cities that are too close together and will actually choose cities that have a little bit of distance between each other, and that's good because we don't want every single city to be so close together that they get hit by splash damage. So now that we've done this and we've ensured that it works on both totally random and on the default playstyle, we can actually go ahead and change populations. The reason why the populations are different in here is because totally random also randomizes populations, but in the cities.dat file they're all set to one population, and since it's proportional, they are all going to have the same population in game. And we don't want that. We want to have the game put cities down and prioritize the ones with higher populations, with like Charleston, Huntington, Morgantown, Parkersburg, etc. You know, there's a lot of cities, quote unquote, in here that have triple digit populations. So we need to cut the fat a little bit for our default games. So what we're going to do is, instead of going in and individually editing every single population in here, we want to actually automatically populate this. Now you think, well, how am I going to do that in Notepad++? Well, we're not going to. We're going to Control A, Control C to copy everything, and we're going to leave DEFCON here. And we are going to go into Microsoft Excel real quick, and we're going to do this automatically. So just go into cell A1, paste, import wizard, and you want to do fixed width, and then go next. And you want to make sure that we have our little separators right before the next line. So you got our name, our state, X coordinate, Y coordinate, whether it is a capital, and then we have this random delimiter here. We want to drag that over for our population, and we want to hit finish. So now these are all imported properly, and just to make sure we are not going and accidentally overwriting whether it's a capital or not, because they're both just all ones, we want to go ahead and make sure. Let's just go into another map mod, check out the cities, and make sure we are not. Okay, yeah, so it's not this last column that is populations, it's the second to last column. So we need to keep that in mind when we're working. So we're gonna just make a column wider here. So the way we're gonna do this is the Excel will actually recognize names of cities as geography objects if you tell it to. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, into this off to the side here, I'm going to kind of have my own little workspace over here as opposed to just what we're going to paste back into the text file. We're going to try to generate this geography object, and to do that we need the name first. So we're going to concatenate the name of the city, and we're going to do open quote space, no, open quote, comma, space, end quote. And what it's going to do is that's going to separate the city and then the state. And then we are going to do another comma for our third argument. And we are going to type, well, if you were doing countries or states in this column here, you would just use the actual cell reference. But since I'm using counties, it's going to be a little strange. So I'm just going to write West Virginia. So we're going to drag this all the way down. And ideally there's going to be no duplicates, because that would make our references kind of pointless. But now we have actually created a column with all of the names and the state. Now we can't just immediately turn this into a geography object, because this isn't the text itself, it is a formula which is generating the text. What we want to do is we want to select the whole column, Control C to copy, go to another column, and right click, and we want to paste values. We don't want to paste regular, or it's just going to paste the formula. We want to paste the values. So now we have the actual text, and we can get rid of this. So now what we want to do is we want to turn these all into geography objects, and this is only recognized by Excel, and this is why we're using Excel specifically. So we're going to select the column again, go to Data, Geography, And we're going to scroll down and see all of these have data except for Robinette. We're going to have to do that one manually, but this will work for the vast majority of applications. It is going to be very unlikely that you are going to run into a large number of cities that you need to manually do, unless you're doing something like super obscure or doing a fantasy map. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just click on this top cell, and you see a little data extractor has come off to the side. We're going to click that, and we're going to click population. And then what we have here is we have a cell reference to J1. This is this object, and it's extracting the population. We're going to drag that down to get all of them. Okay, so essentially what's happened here is these field errors are essentially because there are certain areas which do not have population data that Excel is extracting. This one is because Robinette, West Virginia is not being recognized by Excel's databases. And everything else is because these places are so obscure that we may not actually have population data for them readily available. We may actually have to go and find these ourselves. And luckily there's not too many. We can probably just do some investigating on our own. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and look up, we're going to go and look up So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and look up population data for these towns. So the first one, Robinette. We have population 663. And we can just overwrite this with our manual data. We're not, since these have already been generated, we're not losing anything by overwriting errors. So now we just want to go into Seabert, West Virginia. Okay, no population data, so let's see if we can find it another way. So we have this places.com article on this particular town, and it says that the population is 1,533. And we're just going to want to go and do that for every single city that we're missing. So this one is saying there's 256 residents. This article doesn't have any population data, so we're going to just go with what we see. And when you have populations as small as this, it's not extremely important that we're getting super accurate data, because I'm pretty sure that the census doesn't have data on these. These are probably just estimates made by real estate websites. So I'm probably going to speed through this. Okay, so I have finished going through all of these towns and cities and frankly unincorporated communities that have like 10 population, and I've just done the best I could. With the smaller towns, it's going to matter less. If I couldn't find anything, I just made a guess of about 100 to 200 people, usually. Sometimes demographic websites and real estate websites will just have differing populations, and it's just going to be what it's going to be. So what I do now is I take this column, I copy it, and this is the column we're looking for. Remember, not this last one that has the capitals, it's the second to last one. And we're going to paste values. And we're going to take this and we're going to change the formatting a little bit because we don't want the comma when we replace it. So number, use 1000 separator, no. And then get rid of these. Perfect. And now what we're going to do is we are going to take this column here, copy it. We're going to go back into our cities.dat. Going to hold Alt, and we're going to go right to the top, right before this one population, and we're going to drag while holding Alt, and we're going to scroll all the way down and get rid of that and paste. And no, that's not what we want to do. Okay, figured it out. So what you need to do is you need to go into Excel and just copy either the data or the column. It doesn't really matter. We're only going to be pasting in population, so just copy your population data. Then you want to open a new file here in your text editor and paste the data. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go up to the top, click the first, like before the first character, hold Alt and drag, and we're going to copy all of this as a column. So now it's copied as a Notepad++ column. And we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to kind of click in here and hold Alt and drag. And since Notepad++ recognizes it as a column now, we're just going to paste it and it's going to be there. And so all of this data is now in. Oop, there's one with a 0. There we go. All right, so now that we have all of our cities.dat stored, we should be good to go. Let's go and open up DEFCON. New game. First, we're going to check on just, well, we're actually only going to check on just the regular cities because, okay. So yeah, it's showing the larger cities as actually being larger. That's what we want. Some of these cities are way too large. Like Parkersburg has 36 million people. Morgantown has 15 million. That's okay. Wheeling has 13 million. Wharton has 9 million. You know, some of these aren't too bad, but like 36 million's excessive, 22 million's excessive, 21 million's pretty excessive, 13 million's definitely excessive for a couple of cities in Mercer. Beckley has 24 million people. So, oh my god, Martinsburg has 20 million people. Okay, yeah, so we're going to need to cut down on these a little bit. But first what we want to do is go in and just do some trimming up of these populations. So what I'm going to do is look at the cities that are the worst offenders So Charlestown, Parkersburg. I think Morgantown's okay. Oak Hill's pretty bad. Okay, well we can't actually do that with nukes flying, so let's go in and pause the game and figure out which ones are really bad. So we're just gonna go, I guess, top to bottom and figure it out. So maybe we should cut down Morgantown a little bit. So it's 15 million. So it doesn't need to be edited that bad, so we'll just drop that down to 20,000. Parkersburg needs to be like cut in a quarter, so it's at 3,000, so let's do like 10,000. Let's try that. Charleston and Huntington, let's see. Huntington has 21 million people, that's pretty bad. So, 26,000. In Charleston, let's also cut that down to about 20-something thousand. Actually, let's try 30,000, 38. Let's just try regular 30,000. Wharton and Wheeling are pretty bad. Make that 17. Weirton is, let's just make that 9,000. Because who the heck's heard of Weirton, right? Fairmont is 18,000. I think that'll be okay. Clarksburg, that might be okay. Buckhannon has quite a few people. Oak Hill has a lot of people. But that's just because of how large these how small the populations are relatively. So what you want to do is generally just go around, see the cities that are just absurdly large, like Beckley. That's kind of crazy for... In general, most of these cities are going to have about similar populations. That's kind of going to be the idea, with some of them being really small and some of them they plateau as they get higher and higher. So, yeah, let's find Beckley. 17,000. Let's just cut that down to 7,000. Martinsburg, let's cut that down to 12,000 since that had 20 million people. I think Wheeling could use a little trim. But we just want to go around and cut down these huge populations until we are satisfied. So we want to find Elkins and Buckhannon. That's pretty large. Let's make that 4,000. Actually 3,000. Let's make that also 3,000. So I've done some cleaning up in terms of populations. Let's reload the mod. Let the game pause so you can actually see what you're doing. Okay, that's a lot less terrible. Charleston's still pretty large, but that's just how it's going to be. Parkersburg is still pretty large, but it's not insane. Vienna. Oh, you know what? It might be using Vienna's real population in Austria. So we know Morgantown is much larger than Fairmont, so we're going to cut down Fairmont a little bit. And you kind of just want to use your common sense a little bit. Try not to get too into it, or you're going to drive yourself insane. But you basically want to just take your cities and just iterate on the populations until you're mostly okay with it. So I'm kind of at the point where I'm happy with most of how the populations look. It's not perfect, it's not going to be, but there might be something that's bothering you if you're looking at this map, and it's that these cities are really, really close together. Like, if we go into the Morgantown area, we have Morgantown, we have Brookhaven, we have Cheat Lake, we have Star City, and Westover. These are called satellite cities, and they are kind of a no-no, because if you have a nuke hit, let's say Charleston, you're going to hit St. Albans, you're going to hit whatever this is, you're going to hit whatever this is. You can't even see the city names because they're just so close together. Bluefield even has Brush Fork as a satellite city. We want to cut down on those. And we might have to do some population readjusting even after we cut down on them. But if we want to get a nice, decently playable mod, it's just good for quality control. So what we're going to do is, instead of just deleting these cities, right? Because, you know, we kind of want to have them for games that are totally random, even if they're in there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have added them to begin with. Is we want to just drop these populations to 1 so they don't show up. We want to have other cities that, although they're smaller, they're not as close to the main city, and we want those to take priority. So we want to have them in the database, but drop them to 1. So Brookhaven, Cheat Lake, Star City, and Westover, we're going to drop all the way to 1. Maybe I'll keep Cheat Lake. And then Fairmont, let's get rid of Pleasant Valley. For Clarksburg, we can get rid of Stonewood. Maybe Bridgeport's okay. Over here for Weirton, Folansby, and Hooverson Heights. If we go over to the Parkersburg area, we got quite a few of them. Say Vienna, Boaz, North Hills. I would say even Blenner, Hesset, and Lubbock. Maybe we'll keep Blennerhassett but get rid of Washington and Lubbock. And we just want to go through all of these cities that have all these cities around them. Like, we want to go through and just axe satellite cities, because if we have too many cities close together, it's going to really, really annoy whoever gets hit, because they're going to lose so much population with one strike, and it's just ugly anyways, so we might as well just get rid of them. So I'm going to speed through this, but I'll still show what I'm doing. So now we've gone through, we've gotten rid of these satellite cities, so what we're going to do now is we're going to reload the game, and if more pop up, we're just going to keep squashing them until either we run out of cities and the stuff with one population starts showing up again, or we get a nice distribution of cities, whichever comes first. So, Nutter Fort, Bridgeport need to go. Granville needs to go. These two are really close, they need to go. I may take a few out of Raleigh County. It's gotten a lot better, but it still needs some cleanup. So we're just going to keep working on it, and we're going to keep iterating on it until we get something we're satisfied with. And then after that, we're going to do one more population cleanup, and then we can push it out. So I'm just going to continue going through this. So I am mostly happy with the city placements. I think there is room for improvement. I think Raleigh County has too many. I also think that Kanawha County could be improved a little bit. Maybe I should get rid of Elkview, but I don't think there's really enough cities to warrant it. I think everything else looks good. Maybe Marshall and Ohio counties could use a little more cleanup, but I'm happy with it. I am ready to do one last round of just population rebalancing, and then we can get to metadata. So we're going to do basically the same process that we did earlier. We're just going to rebalance everything else. So now Charleston has 21 million people again. That's pretty excessive. So let's just knock it down again. Maybe 17,000. Huntington, too many people. And the reason we're doing this is that if we don't, we are going to have a rather unbalanced game. It's going to end as soon as these cities get hit, and that is just not fun. So yeah, I think I am actually happy with this. I think these cities are a little large, but I mean, they're not larger than, say, Moscow or New York City in the base game. And we got plenty of smaller cities, and some of them are a little small, but they're not so small that they are insignificant to gameplay, especially in this area. I kind of like how this turned out. I like how this side turned out. This is just a consequence of this area's geography. There's not much that can be done about that. I think this is ready to be pushed out. So now that we're done with everything to do with cities, we want to do some just final quality checks to make sure everything just looks as good as it can, feels as good as it can before we push it out. So the first thing you want to check, and I'm sure you guys have seen that I've done this very rigorously, is everything needs to have correct names, the spelling and spacing needs to be good. Just go over your cities, make sure you've spelled them right. It feels more professional and just feels a lot nicer when you have everything spelled right. Do your territory borders look jagged? That's something you want to take a look at. So let's go take a look at this. If I go into new game and add AI players, it doesn't look jagged to start, but when we actually start the game and hover over territory, this looks a little to me. I think it could be better. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just let it run in the background so I don't have to reopen it later. We're going to go into our mods, and we want to just buff out the territory a little bit in paint.net. And we're going to do it for all of them. And the way we do that is we just go into Paint Bucket, get the white tool, and we want to up the tolerance a little bit until it's a little bit less jagged. You see how it's more of a got a little bit of a softer boundary. We don't want them to be super jagged because that's how it looks in vanilla DEFCON. It doesn't look jagged, it looks a lot smoother, if that makes sense. So we're just going to do this for all of our territories. We don't need to do it for the water because we did that with the paintbrush anyways. So now that that's done, let's go into the game and reload the mod. Hover over territories, and I think that looks a lot cleaner. You don't have this jagged area right between where you can't place anything. You can place stuff right on your border, and if you think about it, that's what would happen in real life anyways, right? If you have two enemies and they have radar installations, they put it right on their border to get it as far out as possible, and that's generally the meta in the game too, right? So that's another thing taken care of. This could look better, but I'm not too worried about it. So let's just get out of here. Does each territory have enough and the same number of cities when playing both default and totally random? We've went over this. We've gone through the debug.txt. We know we're okay. 30 is a good number for this particular application just because it's so hard to get 50 cities to be spaced out properly and actually have people. So 30 is totally fine in most cases. It's nice to try to get 50, but if you can't, whatever. Now, before we go and do everything else, we want to check if there is any bizarre naval behavior. Now, this is usually if, like, navies don't move, or, like, with no travel nodes, we've already worked with travel nodes, or if they get stuck. And there's really no place for them to get stuck here. The only thing that I can think of is if we open a Sailable. Remember how we were working on travel nodes and the node wouldn't connect from top to top? Well, I went into the game, and if you move your navy up here or up here, you can actually micromanage them and move them over. And there's not a lot of micro to it. You just can't have your navy here and then order it here, and then it'll automatically go over. It won't work like that. You kind of have to get it close and then go right over, and then you'll be into this other area. It works fine for players, and usually you're microing your units anyways in this game, so it's not much of a problem. The real problem, if you are working on a map that has some tight spaces, is navies getting stuck. If I am going to go over to, let's use my Japan and Korea mod as an example. This is the map we have here, and everything looks fine except for this area up here. There is a deployment zone for Manchuria right in this corner here, and if the Navy is coming out, it has a chance to get stuck. And I tried to mitigate that the best I can by clearing out the Sailable, but sometimes it happens. But it's to the point where when I tested this mod in particular, it clears itself up over time, so it's not too much to worry about. It's just something you want to think about when you're going over your final quality checks. Another thing is you want to create a coastlines_low file. And what this is if you go into the game, there is an option for low quality coastlines. Nobody uses this at all in game, but you want to have the option there just in case somebody enables it. They don't want to get the original borders and coastlines of like the real world back, because that's what will happen. If you don't have a coastlines_low and you enable low quality coastlines, it's going to enable the coastlines low for the default map, and so you're going to get real continents over the territories that we've already added, and that's looks really nasty. So what we want to do is, if you don't want to create low quality coastlines, I don't blame you. I wouldn't do it either, because there's no point. Click your coastlines, copy it, paste it, rename the copy to coastlines_low. And that is that. So we've gone through all these quality checks just to make sure everything is nice, everything is smooth, everything works the way it's supposed to. And now we move on to metadata. And this is just the actual like data about the mod itself. So for the most part, we're going to be working in the actual main mods folder. So what we can do is just delete this miscellaneous folder. People aren't going to want to see that when they download the mod. But we have this screenshot.bmp from earlier that we got from our map, right? Well, it's a little bland, I think, because this is the preview you get when you're about to enable a mod. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into paint.net, and I am going to do a little tweaking. So I'm going to change the color of this water for a bit because it's a little dark for my liking. I think it's fine in the selection menu, but I think it's just a little tad dark. So a little darker. I think that looks good. So I'm just going to move that down. And now I want to add a little bit of text just to give it a little bit of flair. So I'm going to go into text. I'm going to use the font or typeface which the actual game uses, which is called Kremlin. I don't think it is on the game originally, or in Windows originally. I think you have to install it yourself. I don't want the fake Cyrillic, so I'm going to, for Kremlin, you have to caps lock it to get Latin looking text. So I'm going to type out the name of the mod. Gonna go and make the text a little smaller. I'm going to try to make it actually look nice. So you have the creator, the title, and version number, I think, is also appropriate. And you could do really anything you want with this. You could make a whole background and do whatever you want with this. This is just the standard that I use. I like it. I think it looks nice. So I'm going to save that. And now what you want to do is go into your mod.txt and open it with, Notepad++ is best. So we named this earlier when we copied over our other mod.txt from a different one. You just want to write a comment that's just a bit of a description. You could be funny with it, or you could actually write something that describes it. I've seen mods that have lore, and the lore is written in the comment. I'm going to do something a little cheeky. I think this is funny. So yeah, we're just going to have a name, a version, the author, and a comment. You could also do website, because that is a field that you can use. See, if you go into another mod and open this, you can actually see that they've linked something. So what I'm going to do is, once this is done, I'm going to link this video to the mod, because it's just, this is the whole idea behind the mod, is less about the mod itself and more about the tutorial. So I'm going to leave this blank for now, but you would just put a link here. So that is done, and what we want to do now is go into this game options that we modified earlier to have 500 cities as our maximum. And we want to edit that. So 500 is absolutely excessive. I want to add a max of 30. And I'm going to make the default, I think I'm going to get to keep the default to 30. Max population's 200, default population's 100. That's all standard. And finally, what I like to do, and you don't have to do this, is just write a little README. So what I do, I go to title, your online alias, and then message here, and then have a change log. What I like to do is, if I release multiple versions of the mod, we'll just do v1.0 initial, and if you do a v1.1, v1.2, you can do all that. It's unnecessary, but it's just the way it's going to work. So at this point, you're basically done, right? You've added all your territories, you've added all the graphics, you've added all your cities, coastlines, whatever. You've done the metadata, and what you want to do then is just publish the mod once you're happy with it. And to do that, just join the DEFCON Discord. I'll put the link in the description, and let us know that you have made a mod. And I will see this, I will publish it to the mod list, and we will have another mod on our mod list. So the last thing I want to go into is troubleshooting. I've tried to cover this as I've gone, but there are a couple things that just trip people up consistently. There's a node route size mismatch. That's an error you get when you launch the game, or not when you launch the game, when you actually start a match, and either you have a node placed on land or it can't connect to other nodes. And you can go into your preferences and enable the showing of nodes to kind of work on them, slowly put them closer and closer to your territory until you run into a node route size mismatch, get rid of the last node you've placed, and then start working around your territory. It's just trial and error until DEFCON Earth comes out. A lot of the times when you have no travel nodes or you have no cities, your ships won't move. They will consistently give orders randomly around the map, but then they will never move. That's because you have no cities. So once you add cities, that should fix itself. There are also, if you load the game and you get something like fatal error at line number, like I think 283 is one of them, or 83, your image has to be in RGB or grayscale. You are not going to be able to use indexed BMPs. Sorry. Change that in GIMP. We went over that. When you are exporting from GIMP, do not write color space information, or you might get a different error. You might also have the wrong resolution. Most images, just to be safe, 512 by 285. You could have higher ratios for some of them, but then they might be incompatible with other files. This resolution for everything is just the safest bet. In keeping with talking about RGB and grayscale images, if you're working with the DEFCON mod suite, and I didn't write this down, but we ran into it earlier, only use RGB images, RGB 8-bit images for the DEFCON mod suite. Otherwise, it's going to crash as soon as it loads. So there is also issues where cities don't appear. It is because cities, when placed by the game, they will prioritize larger cities unless they are marked as capitals. If they're capitals, they're automatically prioritized. So let's say I have City A and City B. They're too close to each other. City A is a capital, so City B does not show up. If City A and City B are both capitals, they'll both show up. And I think the threshold for cities showing up is I think it's a little too low, or a little too high. I think that cities should be able to be a little bit closer together. But then you get the issue of satellite cities. But I've showed you how to deal with that, so that shouldn't be a problem. There's also just the city isn't in the territory properly. That usually happens if you have coastal cities. I usually solve that by just putting them slightly inwards, and if I really want them to be on the edge, I can manually just increase or decrease the x coordinate until they are to where I want them to be. There's also a rare issue where territories will just incorrectly show up in your map selection, and that's just because their files are improperly named, or they're missing, because the default one will be used if it can't find the proper file. So there are probably other issues you can run into. If you're really that worried about it, put it in the comments and I will cover it in the next iteration once DC Earth comes out. But until then, I think this is perfectly fine. I would hope that this was easy to follow, and I hope that if you have any ideas now, this gives you a very, very in-depth guide on how to do exactly what you want to do. So thank you for watching. I really hope this was helpful. I really hope if you have an idea, you know what to do now. So I'm going to hop off. Thank you for indulging me in my little project, and I hope you have a fantastic day.